Good morning, lovely artist demo days people. You are very welcome to my studio. My name is Ali Board and I am joined this morning by my very glamorous helper. This is my husband Richard, better known as Bees to many of you. And you are all fantastically welcome. Now, just in case you're not sure of what it is that we are attempting, and I say attempting this morning, I have been asking you all week. It's my week where I have curation of the Artist Demo Days page. So I've been asking you what your questions are. Is it to do with materials? Is it to do with techniques? Or do you have a burning question? Now, loads of you have been sending your questions in this morning. If you have one that you would like to pose live, please do pop it into the chat. Now, I can't promise this morning, because this is something that we've kind of never attempted before. I can't promise to get to all of them, but I promise that by the end of today, I will go back through that chat and I will try to answer some for you. So what I want to do just very quickly is give a few people a shout out. Denise is in the room. Good morning, Denise. Hilary, Joy, Debbie, Jane, Maureen, Arlene. Ali D is asking if Bees had a nice birthday yesterday. Thank you very much for all of your good wishes. Who else have we got? Heather, Susan, Anne, Wendy, Jean, Donna. And Martin D is in the room as well. How marvellous. Ali H is in the room too. We've got Barbara. Lots and lots of you. Thank you so much for all logging in. I really appreciate it. Now, please do forgive me if this morning, whilst we're broadcasting, I kind of look over to one side because we've got questions coming in, although I do have my glamorous assistant here to help me with any of those questions. Morning, Lisa. And I have some stuff in front of me as well, and I am surrounded by a whole load of art materials just to answer the questions that you have already posed, and hopefully to kind of pick and mix my way through. Did I just see a question come in about what band are you in?
Yeah, Oasis. I wish.
Go on, you tell them.
Well, it's just a local band called Echo Head. That's all. We only do pubs and clubs.
Unfortunately, not so much at the moment.
Well, but we're not doing anything at the moment now.
But bless you for paying attention. Yes, many of you know that Biz is, he won't say it himself, but will say that he's a pretty talented guitarist. My mum is in the room too. Good morning, Mum. And
behave.
Lots of people telling him to behave. And Ali H is saying that you're very brave to do this. I drag all my family and relations onto camera. Most of you will know in the last week where I had curation, I did drag my mum on camera as well. So now let us try to get some of your questions coming together. Now, what I've tried very hard to do is put your questions into categories so that I can answer as many as I possibly can. Like I said, if I don't get to them all, I apologise. I promise I will get to them at some point. So just bear with us. Now, one thing I wanted to say, a lot of you have asked some really big questions, some really huge ones about things like water ratio and all of that kind of stuff. A lot of these answers can be found in my book. So I'm going to give my book a bit of a plug, and here it is, A Beginner's Guide to Watercolour with Mixed Media. Now, I know an awful lot of you were asking questions about colour and squeezing tubes out and things to do with collage and materials and mediums and all sorts of things. And I better land on this page, hadn't I, seeing as this is a painting of you playing. You can find an awful lot of the answers to your questions within this book. If you haven't had a chance to purchase it yet, you can either purchase it through the SAA, or you can purchase it through my website, and it does have an accompanying DVD as well. This doesn't repeat what goes on in the book. This is a companion DVD. It expands on all of the techniques that we find in the book anyway. Is that Teresa? What's Teresa saying? Just dipping in, but has Bees been naughty? I think she might have recognised that you're sitting slightly behind me. But so if you haven't had a chance to purchase that yet, then please do pop over to the website. And here is that website address, www.alisonseaboardhyphen.co.uk. And when you go to the website, I just wanted to show you, here's the home page, and you can scroll on either down the menu or down that home page to find the shop and to find all sorts of other things that I'm going to talk about this morning too. Now, one of the first things I wanted to talk about was paper this morning. A lot of you had questions about watercolor paper, about what I use and why I use it. And I want to thank the following. So I want to thank Jean Pete, Eileen Mole, Susan Ellis, Stephanie Harden, Patricia Barsby. My apologies if anything that if anybody's names I mispronounce, because it's very difficult when people type them to know how to pronounce them. So if I do mispronounce your name, I do apologise. Now, let's talk about paper very briefly. So this is Saunders Waterford. This is my pad of Saunders Waterford paper, but this is not the only way that you can purchase it. Now, in my experience, two things I need to point out to you. One is that no matter who you ask, and no matter what they paint in, you are going to get different answers to this. You will probably have already seen the Artist Demo Days team say things like, oh, I only use Bockingford, I don't like a cotton-based paper, whereas I would say things like, I can't work on Bockingford, I really struggle with it as a surface. Saunders Waterford does everything for me. So it's a bit like shopping in a supermarket. It's completely personal choice. Why do you buy a particular brand of something, and why does somebody else buy a particular brand of something? Because you have tried them out, you have seen if they fit, and that way you make your choices based on that. What I can do is show you this resource. Over on my website, if you scroll down, you will see a little item in the menu that says resources. And when you get to those resources, it will look something like this. And you can find out more about my watercolours. You can download some royalty-free photographs. Lots of things are there for you to use for reference. One of them is a 30-minute video that I shot all about why I use the paper that I do, why I do it, why I've come to that conclusion. And that doesn't mean that I am right. It's simply because I have tested things out. I know a lot of you were asking me about that you don't like cotton-based papers, that they scare you, that you feel that they aren't going to fit your particular style of painting, and that's absolutely fine. That's completely fine. I mean, one of the things I would absolutely recommend you do, Denise is just saying that she loves Saunders Waterford and Bockingford for different reasons. Absolutely, Denise, I couldn't agree with you more. So how about you pop over to the SAA's website and you buy one of their multi-packs? That way you're not spending money on lots and lots of different pads. You're then testing out those particular papers to see what fits for you. Now, Susan, I know you asked me about how I store my paper. You were saying that you have an outdoor studio and that you have lots of people answering questions. No, answer the questions, Ali and Denise, absolutely. It means bees can chill out a little bit. Susan was asking about that she had an outdoor studio and that she stores her paper in a plastic box, but it still gets damp and breaks down. Now, one of the things that I need to tell you about, no matter what your paper is that you use, you need to give it some air, and you need to give it air that's not damp, okay? The reason being, any archival qualities that are injected into this paper are going to break down in any air that is damp. And one of the things that my dad told me, my dad is a stamp collector, and he will tell me very often that in between the pages of his albums, he actually has to move the air between the pages. You can't just buy a pack of paper, leave it in plastic, and then expect it to all be fine and dandy when you go to use it. Actually, you have to change the air. So he will open and close the sheets of his stamp albums to make sure that he puts fresh air between them, and that fresh air is really important. So I know this isn't the thing that you want to hear, Susan, but unfortunately you can't keep your paper in that outside environment. It's gelatin based, and any dampness that's in the air or dampness that happens within a box is going to break down the surface of your paper. Now, what's Anne saying, bees?
I certainly realise that cheap watercolour paper is no use if you want good results. My painting improved when I started to use my good paper.
Ah, that's a really interesting point, Anne, and I know that lots of our Artist Demo Days team are going to have different opinions on that, but it's certainly worth knowing that if you upgrade your paper a little bit, then you're going to get better results, okay? Now, some other things that you might want to know. I have two other pads that I use. I'm just reaching over my shoulder to get them. I don't only use the Saunders Waterford pad. I also use a pad that is called Milford, okay? Milford is a little bit different as a watercolour paper because it has an incredibly heavy size on it. What is size? Size is the stuff that coats the fibres of that paper without wanting to get it. Go and watch the video on my website. It's much more in depth. The sizing that is put on it is the stuff that stops it going like blotting paper. Now, if you've ever used kind of like a tissue paper or even a blotting paper, or sometimes those handmade papers, you'll know that when you put your brush to them, they absorb all of the water and they go very much like blotting paper. And you can't paint on them particularly well. So the sizing is the thing that stops that. Now, that Milford paper has a very heavy size to it, to the point where actually it's almost waterproof. And so if you like those kind of soft, ethereal, floating the colour on the surface techniques, or if you like to lift your colour out, paper with a very heavy size is going to do that much more readily for you. Ceris is saying, would a dehumidifier help? Not really. I wish it did. I wish that was the answer to it, but actually you just need to store your paper somewhere really dry. Heather is saying, I use cheap paper to practice a technique that I'm not sure about, then I do the painting on good quality. Yes, absolutely. You have to make it fit however you can. Now, I have a bit of an upgrade on even that I say I even practice on my good quality paper because I don't want there to be a shift between the good quality paper that I use and then the stuff that I've practiced on. I don't want them to react a bit differently. But you've seen me, haven't you, where I work on the back of paintings and stuff that hasn't worked particularly well, or you know, I never kind of use one piece of paper and then that's it, do I? I will always test my colours out. I'll paint on the back. I'll use all sorts of things for you know, kind of testing. Poor sizing is called sucky paper in my house. Yes, Denise. I don't know that we call it sucky paper. Stuff for the fire, I think, is probably what we would use it for. So I have my Saunders Waterford pad, I have my Milford pad, and then I have this edition as well at the moment. I'm going to take you back to that overhead camera. This is a new addition to the range of papers that I use. This is a black watercolour pad, and I'm going to talk more about this later on, but I have started doing quite a bit of work on black. You can see a very quick painting that I did there about when I was on Hoshanda, where I was talking about metallics, and so the black is a real test of my skills. Rather than going from the lightest thing to the darkest thing, I've started working in reverse, because why should acrylic painters have all the fun? And so I've started going from the darkest thing to the lightest thing. So, but I will talk more about that when we get on to a few other materials. So I hope that's answered a few things about your paper queries. Like I said, if you do have any more questions, pop them into the comments, put it on the Artist Demo Days page, or don't forget, we now have the Addicts page, ADDICTS, which is our little painting community where you can go and ask each other, because don't take our word for it, don't take the 6 of our word for it. Go and talk to each other about it. Ask each other questions. The whole point of that group is that it's a fantastic community where you can ask and answer questions.
Ali's asking if it's available from the SAI. I don't know if it's that. She means that black pad.
Yes, Ali, thank you for that. Ali D does mean the black pad, and I can absolutely tell you, Ali D, that the code is all in capital letters, is ABBWPQ, and I have been assured that it is now on the SAA site. Thank you very much for asking that question.
Heather is asking, is the black paper cotton?
No, Heather, the black paper isn't cotton, because we have tried to keep the price in the respectable range. Black cotton paper, you can get it. It's made by Clairefontaine, but it is expensive. I am going to warn you now. I have got some myself. It is very beautiful to work on, and I have worked on it, but with my own black watercolor pad, I didn't want to be overly spending money for you because of the way paper is made, and it's not obviously made in as big a bulk as white watercolor paper. That black watercolor paper can work out to be 30, 35, 40 pounds a pad, so we have tried to keep it on the down low a little bit. So we haven't compromised on the quality, we've just not gone for the cotton in our own pad. What are other people saying? Oh yes, Ali D is saying that the pad is on the website. Awesome, thank you very much. Susan is saying, so yes, it was Susan that asked the question about the paper being out in the in her outside studio. We've been talking about this a lot recently, haven't we? Where we are building some new storage out in the garden, about lining it and how we can keep things damp proof.
Trying to keep a shed insulated as well, just to keep the damp down, but it's very, very difficult to keep a shed, totally damp free.
Yeah, I mean, even really well built summer houses and things like that, they're going to suffer from condensation and things, aren't they? Ah, the lovely Tara is in the room. Tara, say good morning.
Hello,
to Tara. She has very kindly put the link to that black pad. Thank you very much, Tara. That's really kind of you. So I hope that's answered your questions about paper. Like I said, if it hasn't, talk to each other. I will try to get to some more later on. Now, I want to talk to you about paint now. And these are the people I want to thank for their questions that have come in. Joy Smith, Debbie Davidge, Anita Maloney. Good morning, Anita. Sheena Dew, Pauline Coombs and Caroline Atkinson. Thank you very much for your questions coming in. Now again, I'm going to sound like a bit of a stuck record, because you wanted to know about why I choose the colours that I do, how I use the colours that I do. Lots of answers to that in my book, it has to be said. And also, if you want to pop over to that resources page, you will also find that there's a little section about my favourite colours, and then I do break some of those colours down into, I'm working on the resources part of the website where I've looked at violets and I've looked at greens. I will get to the other colours, I promise. it's a work in progress. Everything in this place is a work in progress, isn't it? Including me. Now, Anita, you wanted to know why I squeeze my colours out into my pans and what I do to combat knowing which pan is which. So let's take you to that overhead shot and show you my pans and tubes. Now, just to give you a bit of an overview, the pans that you buy ready-made, the kind of hard ones that you buy in a kit, I struggle to get enough colour from those. I find them too hard. I find that I have to wet them too much. I find I have to scrub away at the surface, and that colour doesn't transfer as easy as I would like. I'm not a massive fan of colour straight out of the tube, okay, for lots of reasons. One is that I find that consistency to be a bit too sticky. But also, do you know what else? These little lids, I mean, these are the 15mm tubes, so these aren't too bad. But the 5mm tubes, those little lids drive me insane. Taking them off, putting them back on again every time I want to use them, they get all gunked up. I can't be doing with it. Cannot be doing with it. So what I do is I take a tube and I squeeze it out into an empty plastic pan. And then I allow that to dry. And that for me, when what we'll do is we'll zoom in, we'll use the wonders of technology and we'll zoom in a little bit so that you can see it in close up. So here is my pan of Moon Glow. And what I do is I wet my brush and I roll my brush into my colour. And then what I get is a nice consistency because I haven't got any kind of lumps in it at all. I tend not to mix my colours. I use my colours fresh as they are from the tube. And so I roll my brush in that colour, and then you can hopefully see that the colour has coated all the bristles really, really perfectly. And that way I have the perfect consistency. Now, Anita was asking me, how on earth, with all the hundreds of colours that I have, how do I know which one is which? Now, she was saying that she uses permanent pen and it rubs off. Now, I have to say, being a stationer's daughter, I, of course, have a labelling machine that prints tiny little labels that fit on the side of my pans. And if I zoom in there, you can see there's my descriptive label. So I record all sorts of things actually on the label to help me understand what it is that I'm using. So I've got the title here, I've got Moon Glow, I've then got the pigment numbers on here so that I know what it is that I'm using. But I also, so in the case of this one, if we can just turn that over, let's get that into shot. I've got that it's DS, so that's a Daniel Smith colour. I've got that it's semi-transparent. I would also record it if I wasn't quite sure that it granulated. All of those kind of things. What's Helen saying, Bees?
She just says how the tubes twist and the tops stick, don't they? And it's a bit of a nightmare.
They do, absolutely. And if you have a bit of a problem with fingers and hands, they can be so frustrating. They really can. And you can probably see, even just coming to the end of my tube of Moon Glow there, that the tube isn't in the best state it could possibly be. So, you know, rather than using it every single day, I find I completely agree with you, Helen. Those lids are a bit of a nightmare. But that, again, a bit like the paper, that isn't the answer for everybody. So you just have to test these things out and see if they fit. Now, who asked me the next question? Debbie, I believe you asked me the next question about greys. She asked a very pertinent question, and I don't think you saw this one come in, Bees. She asked me if I could only pick one grey, what would it be? And because we were talking about Payne's grey or Jane's grey or translucent grey. So I do like translucent grey. That is an SAA colour. But I have to say, I'm trying to find, what have I done with my pad of paper? There it is. I do like the translucent grey. I'm not a massive fan of Payne's grey, it has to be said, because Payne's grey has black in it, and it's not that I'm averse to using black. It's just simply because if I want to use black, I will use it on its own.
Joe is asking, where can you buy empty pans?
So, Joe, you can buy them from the SAA, and I'm sure if Tara is still around, she might be kind enough to put the link in. Or you can purchase them from my website, Joe. You can buy them from each.
I think Pat has asked the same question.
Yes. Good morning, Pat. Good morning, Joe. Yes, you can buy those, and they come in half pan size, which is literally half of this, or this is what's known as a full pan size. So here is the Jane's Grey. So what you can do as well, actually, before you start painting with these, is you can give them a bit of a spritz, or you could give it a bit of a spritz if it had some water in it. I'm going to give it to my glamorous assistant because I'm going to need that in a second. So I've given it a little bit of water. So there we go, me rolling my brush in it to pick up that colour. And here is the Jane's Grey. Now, Jane's Grey is a convenience colour in that it is ultramarine and burnt umber pigments together. Thank you very much, honey. And there you go. You can see that it goes from a very dark tone to a very pale tone. Is Tara helping us out?
Tara has posted the link, I believe,
to the empty pans. Marvellous. Thank you very much. And
Ali's gran opened them with a pair of pliers.
That's brilliant. Gran. That's good old gran. Yeah, no nonsense with that. So that is the Jane's Grey. That is my favourite. And it is, if you really have to pin me down to one of them, I would say that it is this one. This is a Daniel Smith colour, which is why, rather than using expensive ones all the time, because I know some of you don't like using Daniel Smith, that use the SAA's translucent grey. That is my second choice.
Jean has a tip for opening stuck caps: hot water.
Ah, okay, so running it under the hot tap, or yes, or sometimes you can kind of crack them on the edge, can't you?
Barbara uses a nutcracker.
Ah, very good indeed. Because of course the problem that you have is that if you split this cap, then the air's going to get into your paint, and then it all goes hard, and then you're in all sorts of you're going to get all sorts of problems, aren't you? So Debbie, I hope that answers that question for you. Right, I'm going to go back to face on shot, because we have an interesting experiment coming up. Now this, when I saw this question come in, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, how am I going to tackle this? But I did some homework overnight. Now the question came in from Sheena, and it was about using Brusho with alcohol inks, and her question was, can you make alcohol inks by using Brusho pigments? And I have to say, I didn't know the answer to that, so I googled it and came up with a solution. Have we got something else coming in?
I'll just read it and I'll let you know.
Okay, this is why I need my glamorous assistant this morning. You've all been brilliant at sending in your questions. Thank you so much. Keep them coming in. Give B some work in the morning. What's Wendy saying?
Whilst I've been able to return them, I've had 2 large tubes of DS, I guess that's Daniel Smith.
Yes, it is.
That have separated and have been like glue to apply. Overall, I'm a fan of Daniel Smith, but a bit concerned about how long these paints last. They are stored at room temperature. So,
Wendy, sometimes, due to the nature of the pigment, they do separate in the tube. And I've had a couple of colours, not just Daniel Smith, that it happens to. I have to say, I've had it happen in the SAA's brand of paints. I've had it happen in Dale Rowney, Winsor & Newton, all sorts of things. And just because of the nature of that pigment, they separate out in the tube. And so what I tend to do is I squeeze them out and I give them a really good stir. Sometimes they do just settle. They have all been archivally tested. I can absolutely promise you that. They wouldn't be put on the market without it. Obviously you need to look at things like light fastness, all of that kind of stuff, but I promise you that they are fine and dandy.
Susan's asking, which company do you use to print out cards of artwork?
Okay, so can you remind me about that question, and I will answer that later. Thank you very much for that question, Susan. Denise is saying you don't work hard at all.
No, I know.
Yeah, some of you may have seen we're having a bit of a rebuild on the studio. So let us get back to the question about Brusho and alcohol. So I went online and I had a look, and I know some of you had questions as well about what paper to use alcohol inks on. Dee is saying good morning.
Oh, morning, Dee.
And Yupo paper is absolutely a fantastic surface for you to use. But also a big thanks to, now I've got to look up who answered this very quickly. Pauline Coombs answered this. Thank you, Pauline. She was talking about using photographic paper. So I've got some photographic paper in front of me too. Let's go to the overhead shot. And let's just zoom out a little bit.
Catherine is asking, how long does the paint last once it's been put into a pan? Does it just reactivate with water, or could it separate like sometimes happens with a tube?
It does just reactivate with a little bit of water. That's a really good question, Catherine. Thank you very much for that. Yes, it's absolutely fine. I have not myself ever had a problem with it. So here's going to be my first ever experiment with this. So here's my Brusho powder. Obviously, I have a long relationship with Brusho. I use it a lot in my work. If you have, if you're an SAA member, obviously you will have seen that I've done an awful lot of work with Brusho for them. It's such a fantastic product. But Ali Hargreaves, as part of the Artist Demo Days, she has also done a lot of work with Brusho. I know we both love it. It gets an absolute thumbs up from the Ali camp. So I've got some violet here, which today I'm going to sprinkle out just with the handle of my paintbrush. So I'm going to tap a few grains. Now, obviously going onto photographic paper is a whole new experiment for me. So I promise you, I didn't do this last night, did I? I didn't cheat and test it out. We were far too busy celebrating your birthday last night. So we had there's some violet Brusho, and here's some grey Brusho. Oh dear, excuse me. Let's give that just a quick stir, and let's drop some of that onto the paper too. Now you could use your coffee stirrer, you can tap it out of a pot, whichever is the most convenient for you. What's Tara saying?
You've ruined all the desks up at the headquarters with your Brusho.
Thanks, Tara. So lovely to have you here. Yes, I do know that there's a funny story about when I shot my last Brusho DVD. Gary had painted this beautiful white worktop for me, and then I did Brusho, and it took him several hundred coats of white paint to get rid of all the Brusho. Is that what Ali H is saying?
Yeah.
Righty-ho, let's give this a go, shall we? So, what have I just done? I have a bottle of isopropanol here. You can get this online. It's not tricky to get. You want isopropanol, or you want that very, very posh vodka that you bring back from Russia that's about 80% proof. You want it to have a high alcohol content if you're going to make your own alcohol inks. We, of course, have a bottle of isopropanol in the house. Of course we do. Because with alcohol ink experiments that I've done before, this is a really lovely way of thinning them out. So that is what I have done. And all I've got is a pipette with that isopropanol in it. And I think what I better do, because I don't really want isopropanol in my lap, is put my board down flat, and then all I'm going to do is drop some of this isopropanol over the top of my Brusho powders. So we're dropping them on, and they're starting to dissolve them a little bit. I'm going to try to make them run too, and you can see that you can create some really interesting patterns and backgrounds. Now this is the photographic paper, so like I said, I've not used this before. I would ordinarily do it on a Yupo paper or something else. Are you backing away from from the painting that I do? But Bobby's is flinching here as I'm doing this. But why am I using isopropanol? Because it evaporates really, really quickly. So I can get some interesting marks. I can get some interesting backgrounds.
I think Ali uses gin.
Oh, Ali, that's just a waste of gin. That is an absolute waste of gin. So you can see not only does alcohol work on photographic paper, but it works with Brusho as well.
Jenny was asking which side of the photo paper were you using?
I'm using the glossy side. That's a very good point, Jenny. Thank you very much for that. Lots of people saying, Denise is saying gin is for drinking. Anne is saying I've loads of inkjet photo paper that I don't use anymore. Could I use that with alcohol inks? Yes, apparently, absolutely. But just give it an experiment and see what happens. I'm not going to lie to you. Yupo is far superior because photo paper does have a paper element to it, and you can probably see it's gone through the back. But if you're just testing something out, I tell you the other thing that works really well is Lisa is saying it's a waste of vodka. I couldn't possibly comment, Lisa.
You can always lick your picture afterwards.
Okay. A bit like scratch and sniff stickers. You can just lick your pictures afterwards. Ah, Mr. Templeman's in the room as well. Good morning, Gary. We were just talking about you. Your ears burning. The other thing that you can use for alcohol inks, which is really, really interesting, is you can use ceramic tiles. So if you have a DIY project and you've got some tiles left over, obviously white is preferable, but that's not the end of it. You can use your tiles for that too. Are there questions coming in?
Rona is asking, does Yupo have a wrong and a right side?
Not that I've ever come across, Rona. There are two different kinds of Yupo. There's the wet media one and the ordinary one. I particularly like the wet media version, but
Debbie,
that's...
Sorry.
No, go on.
Debbie is asking, what about spritz bleach on photo paper?
Do you know what, Debbie? I'm going to be terribly honest. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Test it out. Put it on the Addicts page and share your experiments with us. That's what we would like to hear. Anything else?
No, we're good at the moment. We're discussing alcohol at the moment.
Okay, fine. I'll leave you to discuss alcohol. Now, hopefully that's given you some ideas. Certainly given me some ideas. I hadn't thought about using the Brusho with the isopropanol, so that's going to be interesting. But there was a question that came in from Caroline. And Caroline's question was about using gouache, and she had had a problem with her gouache in that she had painted it on and she'd come back to it the following day and it had cracked and fallen off. So I want to get to that question. Are there other things coming in?
Not at the moment.
Okay, that's all right. And I'm just keeping
posted.
tabs. Thank you very much. So I want to very easily answer that question for you, Caroline. So I'm going to guess, but I would say that your gouache was a little bit on the thick side. So let me help you. Let's take you back to overhead cam. And let's zoom out a little bit so that you can see the black pad. You saw me say earlier that I was going to return to the black pad. And now is the moment for that. So let's just fold that over.
Jean has seen that bleach will make the paper go yellow over time.
Yes, it will. Jean, I have noticed myself that rather than using bleach, I use Milton. You may have seen me use that on a couple of demonstrations. And in my experience, Milton doesn't yellow the paper nearly as much as bleach does. Roz saying, confused from Menorca, definitely need to watch from the beginning. Yes, good morning, Roz. If you are tuning in and you have literally only just tuned in, I am trying to answer all of the questions that you put on the Artist Demo Days page this week. Of course, don't forget that this broadcast is archived over on the Artist Demo Days page, so you can go back and watch it as many times as you like. Good morning, Claudia. You can always go back and watch all of those tutorials, and if you carry on until the end of this broadcast, you will see me reference one of those tutorials too. So very important that you know that resource is there for you. So here is a piece of the black watercolour paper, and here is my nearly depleted tube of gouache. Now ordinarily I would do this on a palette, but I want to show you it on the black paper so you can very easily see what I am doing with it. So I'm going to take the lid off and I'm going to squeeze some of this gouache out. It's kind of, it's similar to watercolour, but it has much more body. In fact, Turner used to call it body colour. If you look at through any catalogues of his work, and it would say watercolour and body colour is gouache. So all of you art police out there that say Turner would never have used gouache, he did, because he liked to work on things like blue laid paper, coloured papers, and you need something with a bit more oomph to be able to do that. So here is my gouache squeezed out. Now if I use it in this consistency, it's very thick, it will go on very white, but what tends to happen is that you have a build-up of excess colour. Let's zoom in so that you can see that in glorious close-up. You tend to have an actual lump form when you use it really thickly, and that is usually what dries out and cracks. Let's see if we can get a bit of raking light over that. You can see that's kind of got a bit of a lump at the bottom. So several of us on the Artist Demo Days team like to use gouache in our work, and we usually say a single cream or a double cream consistency. And that way what you're doing is you're flattening out the pigment and the binder that's in there, and then when you go to paint it on, you will see that you still get that beautiful coverage, but it's a much flatter consistency. So if I lift that up, you can see it's not that kind of lumpy and bumpy consistency that we've had before. So for me, I would say, Caroline, if you're having problems with your gouache, it's not because you used it over the top of watercolour. I use it over the top of watercolour all the time, but that lovely single cream consistency and being able to coat all the bristles of your brush means that it covers really beautifully, but it's not going to fall off either. And hopefully that answers your question about gouache. I'm sure if you watch back any of the Artist Demo Days demonstrations that particularly Jeremy has done, I know I've used it in my demos too, you will see us talk about this kind of single cream, double cream consistency before we start painting. Okay, that brings us to the end of the paint section.
Okay.
So what we're going to do now, let me just, I've got it on prompt cards, I had to, didn't I, is we'll get to the other tools. So I tried to kind of put everything else. We talked about paper, we've talked about paint, I'm now trying to get into the everything else type scenario. Now, like I said, don't forget, this broadcast is going to be archived on the Artist Demo Days website page, but I'm also going to archive it over on my website too. So to remind you of my website, it's www.alisonseaboard-fineart.co.uk. I have a page on there which lists all of the Artist Demo Days demonstrations that I have done. And of course, you've got that resources page there too.
Arlene is asking, what are your thoughts on using coloured pencils on black watercolour paper?
Excellent. Yeah, mix it up. I'm a mixed media painter. The more mixed up you can make it, the better. See how it goes. You're going to get on better with pencils that have a really good coverage. So something like the Derwent range or similar, the Faber-Castell, those kind of brands, they're going to stand you in better stead, but just try it out. The thing about that black paper is you can use Pearlex on it, Posca pens, opaque watercolours, gouache, pastels, you name it. It's very, very multifunctional. Is Gary talking about that table still that I covered in Brusho?
I missed that, yes, very probably, yeah.
Had to get an industrial mould sealant to cover up the Brusho on the studio table. Sorry, Gary. Sorry. And Gary's going, ooh, fancy graphics. Yeah, I've been channeling you, Gary. Should I do that one more time just to... Look at that. Goodness. And Denise is saying Sharon uses colour pencils a lot on black paper. That is good to know. Thank you, Denise. So these are the people I want to thank for your input on this. So Wendy Jones, Joe Harrison, Shirley Muter, Margaret Prout, Diane Hudson, Arlene Walsh. My apologies if I have mispronounced any of those. Now, Wendy, you were asking about the combination of tissue, glue and paint. I'm going to give you a very brief overview on this. If you go back to my Hailing Island demonstration, which is on the Artist Demo Days archive, I use ordinary tissue paper. I don't use anything fancy at all. Gary's sending me a smiley face. The glue that I use is Bindex, but you can equally use Mod Podge or PVA glue. I would just thin them down a little bit. I use Bindex because it's the right consistency straight out of the tube. That's the reason that I do. And I use all sorts of paint over the top of it. I use watercolor over the top of it. I use gouache over the top of it, acrylic inks, Brusho, you name it. So Wendy, if you do have any more questions about that, please do email me. And this is the time to bring up more fancy graphics. If you have a very specific question that is too long to talk about this morning, but you would still like to chat to me about it further, please do email me. I don't often do this, but as I like to answer technical questions about materials, you are very welcome to email me. And my email address is downendfarmstudio@gmail.com. If you'd like to chat further about stuff, send it in a messenger on the Artist Demo Days page or drop me a line. I would love to hear from you. Caroline, is that feedback about the gouache from Caroline? What's she saying?
She's just saying lesson learned. It's good advice.
Brilliant, well done. Now, Joe, you were asking me about brushes, and you were saying about wanting to get brushes for specific mark making. And I wanted to talk about this just very briefly. You may have noticed that I use these brushes pretty much all the time. These are the SAA imitation sable brushes. And there are two schools of thought on this, and the great thing about the Artist Demo Days team is that you have both schools of thought within our team. I tend to use one lot of brushes to make all my marks. Now, admittedly, I have brushes for watercolours and I have brushes for acrylic, but I tend to stick to round brushes, and then I try to vary the mark that I am making. But you also have the other school of thought, which is definitely something that Matthew dips into, where he suggests that you use a specific brush to make a specific mark. Now, he is not right or wrong, and I am not right or wrong. It depends on how you like to make your marks. I use all sorts of other things as well. I use bits of cut-up credit card. Ali H uses printmaking tools. You'll have seen all sorts of things happen. But where brushes are concerned, me personally, and I can only talk about myself, I prefer round brushes, and then I can vary the mark that I make with them. But if that system doesn't work for you, watch Matthew's demonstrations back where he uses his tree brushes and all sorts of things. Really interesting. So hop over to that archive and watch him. Morning, Tony. Tony's saying good morning to you as well. Now, Shirley asked a massive question about a recipe for granulation fluid. Again, I'm going to answer this really briefly for you. Granulation medium is not something I use an awful lot. There are other members of the team that do, and I'm sure you've seen lots of other artists use it too. And it can be expensive, and if you use an awful lot of it, I sort of see your point that you want to maybe mix your own up. There are recipes out there. I googled last night and I did find a couple of recipes, and I believe that a major artist in a next book coming up has been experimenting with that. I don't want to talk about that because I don't know how public that is, but I know she's been talking about experimenting with making her own. Now, the way that I approach granulation medium, I don't use it because I don't dip into things like acrylic inks where I might be using it with it. And I have to say, and this is going to sound really lazy, if I want a colour to granulate, I find the version of that colour that granulates. So for example, if I want a blue to granulate and I want it to granulate really well, I will use cerulean or cobalt blue or French ultramarine. I won't use phthalo blue and a granulation medium. Because to my mind, where watercolours are concerned, granulation is something that happens physically. So it is where the pigment settles into the paper. Or you have not only granulation, you have flocculation as well, which I have to say really carefully of a Friday morning, where the pigment attracts other pigment particles and it settles in the surface of the paper. Now you can't necessarily replicate that, so I will actually go and find colours that will do that for me. And now, of course, just recently you've had the Schminker super granulating watercolours. If you're an SAA member, you will have seen a video go out that I did, and you will have seen Anita Pounder talk about them too. So do a little bit of homework on your granulating colours, but I promise you, Shirley, that if I find and if I can make a version of granulation medium, I'm going to do some experiments myself. I promise you guys will be the first to know. What
Rona is just thanking you for the advice on keeping a separate brush for the indigo.
Oh, I don't think that was me. I wonder if that was one of the other artists in one of their demonstrations. If you're one of the other artist demo days team and that was your advice, thank you very much for that. Now, Arlene, I'm going to rattle through these now. Arlene was asking about why would I use black watercolour ground on black watercolour paper, and I've got some examples for you. So let's take you back to the overhead camera. So here is an example of where I have used white watercolour ground, and I'm probably going to need to zoom in for you guys. So I use white watercolour ground. I don't use it because I want a surface to be like watercolours. I use it to add texture and have the same effect on my watercolour paints. So here you can see a nice lovely patch of texture that I've got here. This is watercolour ground, and if I pull this owl down, you can see at the top I've got further texture. So I add it to my white watercolour surface to create a similar texture to the watercolour paper that I am working on. And therefore, if I am using black watercolour paper, let's zoom out a little bit. Here is an example of a piece of work that I have done on black watercolour paper. You may recognise this from my book. You can see, again, if I zoom in, I've got to find the right bit. So this is a combination of watercolour, gouache and pastel. If I shift this over to create this rust, can you see here I've got this texture. I've used the black watercolour ground on here so that I don't get a transition. Here's black paper here, and here is black watercolour ground. So I get a nice transition from one to the other. If I used white watercolour ground on here, it would show up too much. It wouldn't be that subtle shift that I am after. So Arlene, I hope that answers your question. Watch this space because I'm going to be doing a whole lot more work with the black watercolour paper and black watercolour ground because I am loving that combination. Now, whilst we're talking about, I'm so running out of room. Can I give you one? Thank you very much.
A question coming out.
Okay, what's the question?
Having problems with the fine Posca pens, the 0.7mm, in that after using them and putting them away, the next time I use them, particularly white, I have difficulties to get them to flow.
Okay, would you be kind enough to make a note of that?
Yeah. And
I'll try and answer that for you towards the end, if that's okay. And if not, I will get back to you on that one. CJ Smith, my apologies because I think you use your initials and I don't actually know what your name is. If you are in the room, then apologies for calling you CJ. You had a question about pan pastels and about using lights and darks, and I wanted to share this piece of work with you. So this was a demonstration that I did for the SAA. It is over on their video on demand. And this is a combination of pan pastels. I don't tend to use pan pastels on their own. I tend to use them with pastel pencils. So this is a demonstration that you can actually pop over to the SAA website and watch. I've used pan pastels for all of my blocking in. and I then go back over with pastel pencils to get the kind of the highlights. But I do seem to manage to get lights and darks out of my pan pastels. I just like this kind of lovely smudgy background. And I'm going to give you a very, very sneak preview of a demo that should be coming out sometime in the future for the SAA, which is a hair that I did. Ah, Kathy. That's her name, Kathy. I'm talking to a CJ, and I don't know who I'm talking to. Kathy, it's you that I'm talking to. Thank you. You're in the room. So here I've got, again, pan pastels in the background, very soft, but I've used the pastel pencils over the top for the detail and the highlights. So I hope that answers that question for you. Now, Diane, you had a question about the indented lettering on my Hailing Island project. If you don't know what I'm talking about, here is that project. And if I zoom right in, you should be able to see the indented lettering that I used. The good news is, Diane, if you go back to that Hailing Island demonstration, which is archived over on the Artist Demo Days page, if you go to 18 minutes and 20 seconds, you will be able to see exactly how I did this lettering, what I used, and the way that I get the colour to flow into that. So, Diane, I hope that helps. Is that
Gary's
Gary?
put a link to the sunflower.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Gary. Yes, Gary Templeman, editor and filmmaker extraordinaire, has put the link up there for you. Thank you very, very much for doing that. Who am I talking to? Diane. I hope that helps. You can certainly see how I punched the lettering into that. And don't forget, this was the project that all 6 of us tackled Sharon's photograph, and we all interpreted it in different ways. So that was our Hailing Island project. Right, we're on the home straight now. I want to talk quickly about some of the techniques that you talked about, and the people I have to thank Joy Smith, Julie Hopkins, CJ again, Kathy, Rosie Farrell, Vera Town, Diane Hudson, Janine Daniel, Geraldine Walker and Hilary Williams. Now, the main discussion that was going on our page was about the ratios of water and paint, or how much watercolour you put on. That is a huge subject. It's massive, and I wouldn't even dream of trying to cover that in the time that we have together. What I can tell you is that the wetter the better. The more water you put down and the more you try to get watercolour to flow within that water, the more successful your paintings will be. I know that's really easy to say. It is really dull in that it's down to practice, but I promise you that will help further. Keep watching our demonstrations. Pay attention to how much water we put down. Pay attention to the way we mix our colour on our palettes. I always try in my demonstrations to show you how much water I mix in and the consistency that I'm looking for. All of us try to verbalise that all the time. I know that's not very helpful when you're frustrated, but I promise you it will come. It's not something that happens overnight. And my other big piece of advice is to do with actually how many times your brush touches the paper. Sometimes it's nothing to do with how wet you make your paint or how much you're sloshing it on, but if you're there tattooing the surface of your paper by poking it around and pushing it around, and your brush is touching the paper again and again and again, it's not going to work. Try to loosen up your kind of grip on your brush and try to fill as large an area as you can in as few brush strokes as possible. Anything else coming in?
No, just Denise is, I think she's replied.
Dab dab.
Yeah, dab dab.
Denise is saying dab dab to control your water on the paper. Yes, absolutely. Brush goes in the water, comes out onto, I've lost my bit of kitchen roll now, comes out onto kitchen roll, dab dab. You'll have seen Denise do it, you'll have seen Sharon do it, all of those kind of things. Just, I promise you, keep practicing. I promise you it will come. We've all done it. We've all learned the hard way. We've kind of all had to sit there and put the hours in. Now, Joy had a question about painting brown hair. And I spoke to Sharon last night and she reminded me, I'd forgotten, but over on the Artist Demo Days archive, under that videos tab, she's done a whole tutorial. I was watching it last night about how to paint hair, and she gives you colour advice. She shows you literally stroke by stroke how she applies it, and it's fantastic. I couldn't even go there with how to paint hair. I don't do portraits. That's why Sharon is the queen of it, the absolute queen of it. So go and watch that tutorial. A lot of you were asking about this discussion about if you have a line drawing, how you're supposed to know what size piece of paper to paint it on, about this kind of ratio of drawing to paper. Now, if you look at a lot of my paintings, and I'm just going to move my chair and ask just to tip back, you see my bee picture there? You will notice it has lots of space around it. I paint on pieces of paper that are actually far bigger than I need. And that way, rather than trying to cram it into borders, I give it lots and lots of space around it. Then you have room to let it grow, to change, to alter, all of those kind of things. So I hope that helps. Some of you had some questions about composition. That's a really dull subject. Rather than listening to me, use Pinterest. I use Pinterest. I know Sharon does. I'm pretty sure Ali H does too. Go over to Pinterest and just type composition into Pinterest. And you'll see there's, I just had a quick look, and there's lots and lots of ideas about where to place your focal point. Gives you lots of little thumbnail drawings, all sorts of things. Are you laughing at Jeremy Ford?
Yeah, trying to read it. He has his own language.
Yes, Jeremy does have his own language. Just in case you haven't seen that, that's come through on Messenger. I think Jeremy was saying good morning.
That's how they speak up north.
Oh, don't get that started. No, don't. There'll be emails. So yes, go to Pinterest and have a look at that. Mick is saying, I live in a very, very hard water area. Could the heavy amount of lime in the water have an effect the way watercolour paint reacts? Yes, absolutely. One of the joyful things about living where we are, we have very hard water too, don't we? Extremely hard. Do you know what it does? Makes your watercolours granulate even more. So I think it's an advantage. When I go and paint other places, I actually know, I can tell the difference in the water, which is really tragic, but absolutely true. So I hope that answers that for you. Kathy, you had a question about line and wash and used the best word in the English language. You said, how do I make line and wash not pernickety? That's a great word, isn't it? So go over to Technique Tuesday. If you want to know more about Technique Tuesday, over on my website, alisonseaboard-fineart.co.uk, if you navigate down the menu, you will find a section that is called Ali's blog. And every single week I do a live broadcast on Facebook, and I then archive it over on there. We talk about all sorts of things on there. And what's brilliant is that you can go back through everything that I have done over the last year, all of those demonstrations that I've done. I've done 3, there'll be the last one next week, special demonstrations to try to get us through this horrible, horrible time where a lot of you are feeling isolated. And this week I did a duck demonstration, which I know so many of you have shared over on the Addicts page, for which I am astonishingly grateful and very humbled by. And I did a duck. I did Pippin, the duck that lives 2 doors up from us. And the way that I did it was that I did, instead of doing line and wash, instead of doing pen and then colour, I did wash and line. So I put my colours down first and then I drew back into it. And that stops you being pernickety. If you want to watch that, the line drawing, the photograph, the equipment and the video of how I did it is over on that blog page. And I know some of you have had some questions about perspective too. That's a really, really dry subject. Go to Pinterest, look it up, read as many articles as you can. Again, it comes with practice. Denise has done a fantastic demonstration for us where she did that beautiful row of houses and she was using the brush strokes for that. Go and watch that. You'll learn more from watching somebody create perspective in their buildings than anything else. I know some of you had conversations about rivers and making them not look uphill. Again, watch Matthew's demonstrations. He does it so beautifully. Right, before I do my thank yous, what questions did I skim over?
Earlier on, we had one about where you get your cards printed to.
Ah, yes,
I forget who it was, I'm sorry.
So if you have questions about printing and about where you get cards done, email me. So it is a scheme that if you are an SAA member is going to get rolled out to you very soon. I have my own company that I deal with called Love from the Artist. They're a community interest company, so they don't actually make any profit out of you. They only charge you at cost. If you want to email me, I will send you the details of that company myself. And there was another question from Mick,
Yeah, it was
wasn't
Mick.
there?
Was the Posca pens.
Ah, yes, Posca pens. I just happen to have a Posca pen in my hand.
I can try and find the.
No, it's all right. I can remember that. Thank you. So he was asking about.
Say they were drying or something.
Yeah. So what tends to happen with a Posca pen is that because they are a paint marker, the tips on them do dry out. Now you can buy replacement tips for them. You can absolutely buy replacement tips for them. You can do lots of things. You can remove the tip on pretty much all of the Posca markers, and you can run it under the tap and clean it off. But I do tend to find, actually, Mick, that actually just giving it... Let's shake it with the lid on, shall we? Before I pebble dash you with white paint. Giving it a really, really good shake, pumping the tip up and down on the surface until the ink flows again, does get it to work. But again, Mick, if you and I, because I know you are always very kind and you support me on Technique Tuesday, if you and I want to have more of a conversation about that, then we can. Has Ali D just shared the link from Love from the Artist?
Yes, she has.
Oh, thanks, Ali. That's very kind of you. Let's get back to face on camera. Right, have we covered everything?
I think so. There's no more questions at the moment.
Okay. That was intense. Thank you for being my glamorous assistant today. And thank you very much for all your questions. I hope that answered things. I tried to get to everybody's question. And I have another lesson that I need to do live, but I will go back in just a second. But I will go back and I will go back through all of those queries that you've had. And I will try to answer those questions for you. I just have a few thank yous to make. If you don't mind sticking with me just for a few minutes more, don't log off yet because I have more information. This is my last week of curation of the Facebook page before we have a break for Christmas. But you still have 2 more weeks of curation. You have the lovely Denise next week. Morning, Denise. I don't know what she's doing, but it will be awesome, whatever it is. A late question
coming in. Yeah.
What's that?
Sorry. This is Caroline. Where the gouache on my painting has cracked, is it possible to lift it all off without ruining the painting?
Yes, absolutely. You can either re-wet it, Caroline, and mop it off with a brush, or you can scratch it back very, very carefully with a blunt scalpel, something like that. That will lift it off, but you can certainly re-wet it. So yes, you've got Denise next week, and then you've got Jeremy the week after, and then we've got our big last of the year Artist Demo Days event, the information of which is going to come out soon, I promise. That is the 4th and the 5th of December, and then we're going to take a bit of a break, if you don't mind. But of course, we have set up the Addicts page. Go over, ask to be a member. That is on Facebook. ADD in capital letters and in lowercase ICTS. Request membership. Please answer the questions. Otherwise, I can't approve your membership. It's me and the rest of the team that approve the memberships. Answer the questions so that we know that you're going to behave yourselves. And if you watch Sharon's broadcast, you'll know what she's talking about. Myself and Bees as well, we are going to disappear ever so slightly over the Christmas period because we have a studio to rebuild, which you've already started and I've not done a lot of. I've made a mess. And you've been working very hard. We've got a studio to rebuild and relaunch in the new year. It's very exciting. Stay tuned for that. So this is my last opportunity, apart from our big event in December, to say thank you to all of my Artist Demo Days colleagues. You have been amazing this year. You really have. You've gone with this daft idea that I had, which happened out of a conversation with Matthew. You signed up for it. You've been behind me 100%, helping me do things, taking it, running away with it, and absolutely making it your own. And I couldn't love the 5 of you more for that. I want to give a massive thank you to Bees, not only for sitting here today and traversing the technology, but for always being stood behind me and for pushing me forward. But the biggest thank you I want to make is to all of you out there, to say thank you for supporting us through this testing time. I hope that you think we have supported you too. Don't ever feel that you're alone out there. You are absolutely not. We are always at the end of a camera, at the end of a message, at the end of an email. If you're having a rough day or you just want to say hello to us, just pop up on social media or over on our website, artistdemodays.co.uk. And so it only remains for me to say thank you very much. All of my classes for 2021, January to June, have gone live on my website. Go over and have a look. Go make yourself a cup of coffee. Go and have a bit of a navigate around my website. There's all sorts of goodies to be had on there. Not all of them are paid for. A lot of them are free. Technique Tuesday is always going to be free for you. So thank you. Lots of people saying hello and goodbye and all the rest of it. That's very kind. Take care of yourselves, lovely people. Continue to stay very safe no matter where you are in the world. I will see you on the 4th of December. Denise will look after you next week. Jeremy the week after that. And we will see you very soon. Bye.